Welcome to Lead Pods, the official leadership podcast from USMB for pastors and church leaders, where our goal is to increase our impact together.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 40 of the USMB Lead Pods. My name is Matt Ayersman, and we've got a really great show for you today. I'm excited to welcome back to the show Miss Kadi Cole. Some of you may remember that Kadi joined us last year, and Kadi always does such a great job talking about women in leadership, and specifically women in church leadership. I know this is a potentially divisive issue, and it has a wide variety of opinions about this, but Kadi comes from a very great biblical worldview, and she is so eloquent in how she handles some kind of difficult questions. And so I am so grateful for Kadi. I loved her conversation last time, and when we finished last time, we said there's so much more we need to talk about. So I'm grateful to welcome her back as we continue that conversation. She just finished a new book that is specifically for female leaders, so we'll talk about that quite a bit in the episode. So if you're a female leader listening, I encourage you to check out that book. There's lots of great things in there, but it's also great for men in leadership as well. So I think we all have a lot to learn from Kadi today. I'm really excited to share this conversation with you, so I hope you enjoy kind of a part 2 of my conversation with Kadi Cole.
Deciding on the right college is a big deal. At Fresno Pacific University, they get it. They are a private, nonprofit Christian university where your academic success is their priority. The Mennonite Brethren roots run deep from the classroom to the field. Professors connect you to research and internships. Financial aid makes your education affordable. And with our 4-year guarantee, you'll graduate on time to launch your career. Visit fpu.edu for more information about their undergrad, graduate, and degree completion programs. Fresno Pacific University. Possible happens here.
All right, my friends. Well, today I'm excited to be joined by Kadi Cole. For those of you who have been listening to the podcast for a while, you might remember that Kadi was with us last July. And I was just telling Kadi, we try to spread the wealth a little bit. We don't bring people on for repeat appearances too often. But my time with Kadi just went way too fast last time. We've got a lot more to cover. So Kadi, thank you for joining us once again today.
Well, thank you, Matt. I'm really excited to be back.
Yes, it's great to have you. And if you missed that first episode, please go back and check it out last July. We had a really great conversation. And Kadi, for people who didn't listen, can you give us a quick bio? Tell us about yourself just to get us started here.
Sure. I actually came up professionally in nursing, but ended up being recruited into my church. We were a fast growing church. And so I was in full-time ministry for about 20 years, kind of rode the wave of a big, fast growing church. And in the process, ended up being oftentimes the only or one of few women sort of in the leadership room at the time. And we were a pretty conservative church at that point. And so through the years, I just kind of had these interesting experiences. I do have a master's degree in human resource development. So I started researching it, trying to help churches on that topic. And that was really what we talked about a lot last time, is what we as leaders, as churches, particularly for male leaders, that tends to be who's in leadership. What are some of those simple, easy tweaks we can make to help include more women who have gifts of leadership, make sure our churches are really places where women leaders can thrive and really contribute in their calling towards the mission of our local church.
Yeah, that's awesome. See, again, we were talking offline just a little bit. Last time you and I were out chatting, the conversation kind of drifted towards, kind of because that was what your last book about, was kind of helping male leaders understand, especially in the church, some of the issues they may not be aware of or things that might need to be more aware of in today's culture. So your last book, I want to get this in there, was Developing Female Leaders. That's kind of what we talked about last time, looking from kind of the male perspective. And right after we hung up last time, you said, that was really great. Let's do it again. Let's kind of talk more about the female side of things, which is perfect because that's what your new book is kind of all about. So real quick, your new book, Find Your Leadership Voice in 90 Days. So I encourage, especially the female leaders out there listening, to grab a copy of that. Let's just get started. Tell us about that book. Was it kind of sort of a part 2 to your first one?
It was. I wasn't really anticipating writing it. There was no plan to any of this, to be really honest. But as I was speaking with a lot of leaders at conferences and networking events, and then working with a lot of churches on helping sort of these mostly male populated leadership teams kind of shift their leadership practices, I would always end up in conversations with women on the team who were getting these great opportunities to lead or feeling like they had a voice for the first time. And after about a year or so, I was talking with many of them, and they honestly just weren't enjoying it. Many of them were really struggling. They wanted to step out of leadership. They had sort of gotten this opportunity they felt called to, they had been hoping for a lot of their life, and it just didn't turn out the way they thought that it would. And I just found that so disheartening because these were really talented women, clearly gifted by the Lord, loved their church. Their bosses were thrilled with their performance and their contribution. And yet they internally were still struggling. And a lot of self-doubt, maybe some insecurity. We talked last time about the sticky floor and how we as leaders can do a better job recruiting female leaders, or even any sort of minority leader that maybe feels a little outside the normal status or, what's generally accepted as a leader in your culture. But we didn't really talk, and I didn't talk almost at all in that book about what it's like to be that person. And so that's what this last book really is. It's a little bit more narrative. It's a little bit more about my personal kind of lessons, things I've learned myself, things I've learned working with other female leaders, and really trying to talk about how do we find our leadership voice and do what God's calling us to do. And at the same time, not have these super high expectations of ourselves, not beat ourselves up when we do especially when we do a good job. I think sometimes most guys would be really surprised to realize how critical women are of themselves or how hard they are on themselves after doing an excellent job at their work. And so it's really about that internal dialogue. It's the renewing of our mind. It's reframing our experiences, really challenging the self-talk we have for ourselves and therefore for each other. And it's been really fun to kind of release that little baby into the world and just hear back from a lot of women that are like, this is exactly what I was struggling with, or I thought I was the only person who doubted in this way, or I thought I was the only person who thought I was going crazy, and just be like, no, this is what it's like when you're one of the first or one of the only women, or it's the first time you're stepping into leadership. Quite honestly, Satan loves to attack our thinking, and he wants to get us off kilter. And if we're not going to say no, at least keep us ineffective. And so this is really some practical steps of ways of looking at your leadership and your opportunities, ways to get some help from the people around you and make sure you're walking honestly in truth and in effectiveness.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. So one thing on here you talked about, you just mentioned that a lot of female leaders, when they get in, maybe it's one of their first leadership roles, one thing you've heard is they say, it didn't turn out like I thought it would, or this isn't what I thought, or people aren't treating me the way I thought I'd be treated. How are they treated differently, or what is different from what they expected?
Well, I think for most of us who have had a lot of leadership experience, it's no surprise that you get, the title or the responsibility, and then you're like, wait, no one's listening to me, right? Every leader has this experience. I think what's challenging, particularly for women, is that most of us, particularly if we've grown up in a lot of church activities or we've worked in church a long time or in ministry settings, Christian settings, we haven't always had those early leadership experiences. So Matt, you might look at me, I'm in my late 40s, and you might think, gosh, she's done all these things and she has a couple degrees and she's written a book. But you'd probably be shocked to know how much I have to talk myself into showing up on a podcast like this. Or now I've been around long enough that I'm like, just because I'm nervous doesn't mean I shouldn't do it, but those early experiences really form us. And I didn't grow up professionally in ministry. I grew up in nursing, which has a totally different view of women because it's female dominated. Right. So I brought into ministry some of these early experiences of how to kind of just fake it till you make it, or how to just, go forward with confidence. I got really comfortable with fear of doing, especially in nursing, doing procedures, when someone's having a tough, difficult time physically, they're in trauma or they're bleeding out or something, the nurse stays calm, right? So I learned early on how to separate what I'm feeling from what I need to do. But most people who didn't grow up in those kind of environments and didn't have early leadership opportunities, those are the first time they're doing it. So the first time some of these women are having that experience might be at 35 or 40 or 45 or even 50 or older. And they're still kind of 19 in terms of leadership, but they're 45 in terms of experience and credentials. but particularly in ministry settings, it's a little extra loaded. There's a lot more pressure, a lot more dynamics. We've seen a lot of stress and tension happen for women who've been successful in the marketplace, transition into ministry, and suddenly be like, who am I? I am not a fearful person. Why am I scared to get up in staff meeting and give a good report? So those are sort of the things that kind of come into play that we really have to battle internally. And honestly, if you work with female leaders, you have a lot of room to encourage and support and not placate, but give really good feedback, really solid encouragement, and remind them that they're doing a great job.
Yeah, that's really important. I like that. Another thing you mentioned earlier is the whole idea of the imposter syndrome, the feeling self-doubt, all those kinds of things. This is from a male who I haven't studied this. I'm just curious what your thoughts are, what research you found. Do you know, or is there research on, is it significantly higher in females to feel that way? Because I also have imposter syndrome. I also feel like I don't belong. And it might also be an age thing. I don't know. I'm 33. I don't know. Does that get better with age, or what kind of demographics have you found with those kind of feelings?
Sure. Well, almost every leader, unless you have narcissistic tendencies, tends to struggle with imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And if you don't, but then I'm excited for you. But most of us are going to question ourselves. I think the difference is when the only thing you're questioning yourself is internal. Your environment is supportive. The people around you are supportive. You've had a lot of modeling of what a good performance looks like. It's a lot easier to, on your own, overcome imposter syndrome. Give yourself some self-talk. Maybe you need to call your dad and get a little shot in the arm, or your mentor might come and say, good job. I think for women, it's not specifically women, it's mostly minorities in a situation. So in the church world, women are really minorities in the leadership space. Of course, we're the majority in the congregational space, but in leadership spaces, we're the minorities. This would be the same for people of a different race, kind of regardless. If you're a Black person in an all white church, if you're a white person in an all Black or all Hispanic church, we've seen kind of similar ratios. It's a lot more intense and it's more difficult to come over. I don't have the exact statistics in mind, but the challenge is you're not just overcoming your own internal imposter syndrome. You're also overcoming the fact that you don't have a lot of role models showing you what good performance. So Matt, you might be able to look at yourself and say, well, actually, I remember when so-and-so did it and he actually forgot half his message. So when I got up and gave the message, at least I did better than that. You can kind of talk yourself off the ledge a little bit, or you can be like, well, they laughed as much for me on that joke as they did for, the senior pastor last week. So it must have gone over well. But for most women, we don't have a lot of those examples. And so when we measure ourselves, it's kind of me against nothing, or me against the ultimate example, the person who speaks, acts, talks, every joke lands because the audience totally gets them. That's not a fair measurement when you're just beginning out. So that's one of the bigger issues. The other thing is there's a lot of subtle cues that women have to sort of navigate in the environment. There's a lot of social pressure and cues that women navigate. So when I was just coaching a female leader this morning, super sharp gal, got to teach at a church last weekend, and they weren't expecting a female speaker. So she was one of the first women to show up. She didn't know that when she walked into it. And even so, she's seasoned, she knows what, but when you find out that the room isn't for you, and it has nothing to do with what you're about to talk about, that's a barrier that makes you question yourself more than most men probably ever face when they walk onto stage. It's a little bit more what maybe people in politics or a big CEO, that's about to talk to a union, where there's actual animosity against you. So those sorts of things do derail that sort of inner dialogue. And then I think part of the challenge is some of the pressures women face about their appearance, about what a good, acceptable female is. So when I get up to speak, I'm not only trying to give great content and connect with people as a communicator, which is a very intense job, by the way, like, it takes a lot of resource. It takes energy, it takes a lot of mental concentration. You want to read the room. You brought this message, but the room turned out to be a little bit like this today, or, you're trying to connect and communicate understanding to someone. For women, a lot of times we're also being judged on our appearance. So is she, are those earrings too dangly? Is she too fashionable? Is she not fashionable enough? Is she a little overweight? Like there's all these external things. And we know that because people come up and tell us about them. They're like, I couldn't really pay attention to your talk today because, your outfit was either great or not great. Either way, your outfit distracted me. So there's a lot of those dynamics that we all have going on in our heads as female leaders and communicators that tend to also just kind of magnify that imposter syndrome or the number of things I'm mentally balancing all at the same time while trying to give you a great message or trying to cast a great vision or trying to set really great goals for the team.
Yeah, man, that's really good to hear. Okay, we talked last time, I think, about representation and how important it is just to have a female on your stage, have a female leader visible. Because yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, it's a future investment, right? We're giving
Yeah.
examples for the women yet to come. So
Yep.
when you make those changes now, it speaks to the audience, but you create female leaders that you'll reap the benefits 10, 20, 30 years from now in the future.
Yeah, that's super important. I want to go back to what you just said. You said you were talking to another female leader, and you were kind of using the example if you walk on stage and maybe they're not used to having a female leader up front. What kind of advice do you give people in that situation? Like what can they do, especially if they're already there ready to go? Or if they're as they're preparing, what kind of tips do you share for kind of up and coming female leaders?
Yeah, for those of you gals out there that are kind of being given these opportunities. And this is a very common experience because many times the senior pastor or the head of the district or whoever it is that's in charge really wants to help women find their way. And they're reading my book and doing other things. You know, it's not just my stuff, but they're taking steps. But the congregation or the team or the organization isn't quite with him. They're maybe open, but maybe not. And he's trying to move things forward. So it's familiar to me and a frequent experience for many women to find yourself in that space where you're doing what you've been asked to do, but some, if not all of the room isn't excited to have you do it. I really encourage women to make sure that they're keeping sort of their eye on the ball. And that is that it's not our job, any of us as leaders, it's not our job to convince people that we should be doing what we're doing, right? We're under the leadership of someone who's invited us here. Our job is to steward the moment as best we can and say the things that we believe God has asked us to say and allow him to work in that moment. But we can sort of also make sure and be aware enough that there's something else going on in the room. And for me, at least my approach has been, I think other women may deal with this differently, but for me, I'm always just trying to open up the opportunity for women to come after me and open up even the opportunity for men. It's usually men, but many women have issues with me talking to, but open up space in the room for someone to hear something through someone like me that they maybe have never heard before. And so I try not to placate or become someone else, but I do as a communicator or as a leader, I know my job is to serve the people in front of me. It's not to have an agenda. It's not to force anything. It's to sort of open and expand the vision of what they think God might have for them or for other people. And so I do oftentimes take a little bit of a back step. I might introduce myself in a little bit more gender relatable terms. So I might talk about being married. I might talk about being a mom, because those are areas when I find people are resistant. They go, oh, okay, so she believes in marriage. That's really good. Oh, okay, so she likes being a mom, right? Because I think sometimes when we meet resistance, we have to remember that the resistance is usually based on fear. It's not fear of me. It's not fear of my life. It's on fear of what I might say or what I might do or what I might open up that would be wrong. I mean, we're Christians. We're trying to keep truth and righteousness at the center. And so I'll sort of come in from the back door and just be like, don't worry. I'm not after anybody's husband. Don't worry. I don't think you should leave your kids with horrible daycare people. Like, don't worry. You know, I care about family. I believe, you know, in the things that you believe in. God's called me in a different way. So I talk about those things. I probably also work really hard to build rapport. I think we all do that as communicators, but I am trying to say like, hey, I'm figuring this out also. I think that place of, I don't know if I would call it humility, but that place of like, I understand, right? And I get it because I've been a part of it too. And oftentimes when I speak on this topic in particular, I remind people that I was a leader in a male dominated church for a long time. I was actually a part of these decisions that my own leadership, I think, resisted women for a long time. I wasn't even aware of it. And so I think those are the steps to try and know your audience, to remember that your job is to serve. I think many times women, especially if you do have an advocacy space to your calling or personality, or you're up for a fight, or you have some deep hurts from the past of being overlooked, being held back, or even oppressed in your leadership. or, having people say really hurtful, mean, ungodly things to you about your calling. It's really easy to get angry in those moments and demand that people listen to us. But that's where I think, again, this is a leadership principle that we just apply to our unique situation. Jesus never demanded in his leadership. He never demanded. He spoke honestly. He was respectfully. He got angry, usually on behalf of other people, but he never demanded things for himself. And so when I find myself in those moments, I have to remember this is not about me proving something about me. This is about me opening up some opportunities, maybe for God to do something in the future. So how do I steward the moment where I'm building the most bridges? I'm expanding visions of godliness, and I'm allaying fears. And am I creating a runway that hopefully more people get to come after me that are different, and that sort of take on that fear quotient that I'm experiencing right now?
I love that you're so focused on the next generation. It sounds like you're doing what you can in your stage to help make this better for the future. I love that. And it's just so wise to have that kind of disarming approach. I think that's awesome. So one thing I'm curious about, so what about on the other side of the stage? So you mentioned that sometimes people will comment on earrings or your outfit or whatever. I just don't comment on women's appearance ever. Like, I just feel like that's not my place. I don't want to do that. So I don't know I'm not sure if you have heard that from men and women. Either way, I've heard from other women that sometimes their hardest critics can be other women, especially if you're talking about wardrobe and makeup and whatever. You might get more negative feedback from women than you would from men. I would hope so. Men have no business talking about that. But so what about women in the audience, or other women on staff, or how else can women, maybe if they're leaders in other aspects, or if they're just an attendee or whatever, how can they be supportive of that relationship?
Well, I think when you're trying to lead, you need everybody's support, right? You could use all the positive feedback and great encouragement that you can get. And I think that's where sometimes, one of the challenges of our culture right now for women in ministry is that we're in the in-between. We're sort of coming out of a generation that didn't get a lot of opportunities. We're going into a generation that's probably going to have a lot of opportunities. I'm not really worried or trying to advocate for like the 19 or 20-year-old gal who, thinks she's awesome and has already preached 4 times at her youth group and ran a summer camp and has a whole ministry degree prepared for her. She's going to be fine. It's all of us sort of in the middle, in our 30s and 40s and 50s right now, who really have the most to offer. We're sort of this in-between generation where we haven't had role models and we haven't really had opportunities. And so we're kind of trying to find our way. And I think we can do the most for the kingdom when we cheer each other on authentically. I don't really want someone to come up and be like, you look adorable, when I know I maybe don't. Like, I don't need fake praise. In fact, one of the pieces of research, I can't remember if we talked about this last time, but it's fascinating that women tend to get what's called vague praise, sort of like, good job, girl, or you did great. It was great to have a woman up there. And it doesn't actually help me grow or become better as a leader. And so I would say to you, Matt, and to the guys out there, it's probably not appropriate for you to be like, cute top today, or your hair looks great. But please don't let feedback go unspoken. Talk about my leadership, talk about my communication, talk about my stage presence. I mean, if I have giant dangly earrings that hit the microphone the entire time I talked, please tell me, right? Please tell me. Like, that's not commenting on my appearance. That's saying I couldn't hear you well because I think your earring kept hitting the microphone the whole time. Trying to make sure you're giving helpful, honest critique. Now, not everyone out there. I don't need critical feedback from everyone, but the people who are in charge, the people I report to, the people who I know are in my corner, the people who have expertise about me or about what I've done. So a lot of, I'm not on staff at my church right now, but I have overseen campuses. I've led a lot of campus pastors for a long time. I've done a lot of coaching on speaking and preaching. And so, my campus pastor will oftentimes come up and ask like, okay, what do you have for me this weekend? Right. But he's asking me, but I also care about him. And we have the kind of relationship where I can give him feedback, especially when you see someone who's not normally on stage or not normally leading. Please use your power and encourage them. You're encouraging the kingdom to grow. You're encouraging their future self to do even more. And if you have actual expertise that you can give a suggestion and they're open to it or they ask for it, sometimes I'll even just say, hey, I have worked with some speakers before. If you ever want some suggestions. Now, you did fabulous. I loved A, B, and C, that you really nailed this point. I love the way you used the stage, or it was great to call someone out in the audience and just help us feel like you saw us and we were a part of your message. If you ever want more critical critical feedback or things that I might give someone who I'm coaching, just let me know. And I'd be happy to take notes in the future. I always try to let them know I haven't been taking notes that they didn't ask for, but just offering it and then wait to see if they come back around. It might take a year, especially for female leaders who are not used to doing it. They can only handle so much negative feedback at a time as they're growing their muscles. But making the offer and giving your area of expertise and kind of staying away from the things that maybe aren't your area of expertise, that can be really empowering to women. And just encouragement, like a text, a note, an email, a Facebook post, anything like that, especially in the public arena, really bolsters her up and builds her credibility for other people when you offer your platform of authority and endorse her as a leader. It means the world to everybody.
Yeah. Gosh, I love that. That's great. You just mentioned the idea of kind of this, if the young and up and coming woman probably has more opportunities, especially if she's kind of a go-getter. There's a lot of opportunity, which is great. But that reminded me, I wanted to bring up part of your book. I haven't had a chance to read all of it yet, but I read an excerpt yesterday. Let me just read it and then I'll give you a chance to kind of dive into it. So you say, I get concerned these days when I walk into a Target or Home Goods or come across an ad on social media where I see a journal or a t-shirt or coffee mug telling me the future is female. When we read John 17, we know that's not true. The future is not female. The future is not male. It's not black or white or any one race. It's not young or old or middle age. It's not single or married. It's not rich, poor, or only the middle class. Jesus tells us that the future is together. So the whole idea of the future is female. I see that everywhere too. Yeah. And as a male leader, I always want to be careful. Like I don't know how I feel about that. I want to be an advocate. I want to be a supporter. I think he is the language of a good guy. I want to be a good guy who's, treading carefully and trying to be supportive. So when you hear, it was kind of interesting for me to hear that you don't like that idea of the future as female. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Well, I don't like it just because I wouldn't also like a shirt that says the future is male. Like right. I think when we read through, particularly the New Testament, and we see Jesus, I mentioned John 17 in the book, but when he is at the end of his life, before he is taken by the Roman soldiers to go to the cross, he says some prayers and he prays them out loud. He wants us to know what his last prayers are before he goes into his final steps. And he doesn't pray for any of the things I think he should pray about. I think he should pray about, evangelism and more prayer warriors and people who are generous with the kingdom and more people following him. And he doesn't pray for any of those church strategies. He prays for unity. He prays that everyone would be one as he and the Father are one. And I think that's the picture that he saw for the disciples yet to come for us. And anytime we sort of go from one extreme to the other, I get very concerned. We've come out of historically, maybe, we're doing better in the last little bit, but like the last 500 to 1,000 years. And before that, we have a very patriarchal experience. Like globally. The answer is not to have a matriarchal experience in the future. I see people in the Academy Awards and they're like, if mothers ruled the world, and I'm like, I'm scared of that. I know a lot of really bad mothers out there. I don't want them coming anywhere near the world rulership. Right. So whenever we say all men should be leaders and no women should, and then we reverse it and say all women should be leaders and no men should, we're missing, Romans 12, 1 Corinthians 12, where God decides who he gives leadership to. He chooses, and it's not according to anything on the external. He chooses all of the gifts to be disseminated. And we actually need all of the gifts in fruition to see God's kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. And so that's what I really stand up against is I want women to step up. I want them to find their leadership voice. I want them to exercise gifts in their entire life, particularly in church ministry, because that's what I'm very passionate about. But I want them to use their leadership gifts in their parenting. I want them to use it in their roles they play in the neighborhood, in their workplaces, and in ministry, but not at the expense of anyone else. Just like I think one of the big challenges we have right now is ageism in the church, but it's the opposite ageism we've had historically. Now we want 25-year-old good-looking guys with, shaved heads and dark glasses, and we're all wearing the same t-shirt who are excited to have a party. I'm like, that's not the church either. We're throwing out eldership when we do that. Or if your church is only run by people over 60, you probably need someone who's 25 just to kind of add some life to it or get some new ideas or, make a website, revolutionary. So we need everybody, and we need everybody in the calling God's given them in the stage of life that they're in. We're all on a journey. And you mentioned handing things off to the next generation. Like, it's not a journey we take and it ends. It's a baton we pass. And so am I running hard with the baton that's been passed to me? And am I actively handing batons off behind me? Like, lots of them all the time. I'm grabbing batons and I'm handing them off. I'm grabbing batons and I'm handing them off. That's how the kingdom works on earth. We only get a short amount of time to impact it while we're alive. And it's never going to move forward if we make it only about one kind of person.
That's really good. And you mentioned the whole leadership voice thing. I want to make sure we had plenty of time to talk about this. It's part of the title of your new book. So can you explain for young female leaders, finding your leadership voice? What does that mean? And how can they get on that track? I know, like you've mentioned already, it's female leaders are in a hard spot. They can't be too hard or too soft. They can't be too loud or too quiet. Is that kind of what you talk about with the term leadership voice? Is that what you're kind of trying to coach them through?
Yes, that's exactly right. I think everyone has a leadership voice. Leadership is a gift, but it's also a skill set. And all of us really, as Christians, we have spiritual leadership everywhere we go as believers. God gives us that anointing, but we also have influence in lots of areas of our life. And so knowing your leadership voice to me is understanding kind of what you just said. We tend to be either really passive or really aggressive, but healthy, godly leadership is assertive, right in the middle. Healthy assertiveness, where I speak the truth honestly, but I also care enough about the people around me to be honoring to them. So it's this balance of honest and honoring at the same time. And we have to practice it. We got to find our voice. We got to find what we're passionate about. I walk people through all of that. I say in 90 days, because it's kind of 90 little mini reads every day. I wouldn't call it a devotional because it's not that scripturally based. But it's very God oriented in terms of identifying our calling, knowing the places God has called us to speak up, even when we're fearful, knowing that there are times when we're supposed to stay quiet. Just because you have a leadership voice doesn't mean you should use it all the time. And I think women, a lot of times, because we've been maybe have felt like we couldn't speak up or have even been silenced, when we find that we have something to say and we know we have the power to say it, or maybe we're old enough that we're like, people must listen to me, we tend to use it all the time. And that's not actually godly character either. Jesus was quiet a lot of time as much as he spoke. So if we're really going for Christ-likeness, it's about understanding, when am I called to speak? When am I called to keep quiet? When am I called to stand up and fight for something? When am I called to hold back and wait for God's timing to open the door? It's a lot of nuance. And for most women, we have some enculturation and some bad habits that we've picked up because of gender stereotypes that I try to speak up against, so that you're actually living out biblical godliness, not gender taught roles that really aren't serving you or the kingdom and don't actually bring honor to God.
Yeah, that's really good. Another thing that I saw you wrote somewhere about was the idea of letting young women in versus showing up. Can you talk about that a little bit? What's the difference there?
I think trying to make sure that women are a part of the table, not just allowed to watch it from afar. And I think all of us as leaders can do that. We all have a certain every person has a certain amount of influence and opportunity to be inclusive of people around you. So if you're the senior pastor or on the executive leadership team, and there are women around you or other minorities or people who are new to the church, going like, how do I open up the conversation I'm having, this little side talk with one of my friends? How do I open that up to include another person in, so that they can't just watch me in action, but they're actually a part of what we're doing, versus having to have like a special invitation. Many women may be invited to the room or the table, but hold back, kind of the proverbial stand in the corner or take a seat in the back row. How do I include people in so that from a relational standpoint, we're building rapport, even if they're not going to run the room, just knowing that they're actually supposed to be there and you want to hear what they have to say.
Yeah, that's good. I really like the invitation piece. I think is so important. So one thing, as I'm listening to you, I want to be cautious to see if this is just my male brain or what you think about this. A lot of what you're saying to me just sounds like good leadership, whether it's male or female. Like the whole idea of not being too hard or too soft, too loud, too quiet. A lot of it, to me, as a male leader, I want to be aware of those things as well. But I know that, like we just talked about, the whole representation piece, maybe that's a big reason why it's different for females. But what would you say that really good male or female leadership, excuse me, actually does look fairly similar, but it's maybe just because of the culture that we've come up in, women are having to fight it a little bit more. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, leadership is great leadership, right? It's transcendent. It doesn't really apply to gender. There is a bit of research out about how women tend to lead versus men tend to lead. Different cultures tend to have a little different bias, but I haven't found that to be the case as much. I find a lot of men tend to be collaborative, communicative leaders, especially in ministry, service oriented. Most men go into ministry because they want to preach or teach. They're natural communicators. So I haven't found those kind of genderfied leadership qualities as much. I do think culturally we've been raised differently. And so, yes, most of what I'm talking about is just great leadership. In fact, I've had a surprisingly lot of men read my book, Find Your Leadership Voice in 90 Days. And they're like,
Good.
This was really helpful to me. I'm like, well, yes, it's biblical leadership. It's the basics. But what I've tried to do is address them in a way that would relate to women who have not gotten those kinds of lessons. So Matt, I would guess you grew up in the church, I'm assuming, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
You seem like a church kid. So, you probably had men coming around you older in the church when you were probably 10, 12, 14 years old, and speaking leadership over you and saying, you are really a fine young man. It's fun to see you using your gifts. Why don't you, give the devotional at youth group tonight? Why don't you, do the closing prayer at camp this summer? Would you like to go to a conference with me? Like, you've had these kinds of experiences. Most women have not had any of that. So there hasn't been anything nurtured in them. But the thing that most guys don't realize is they've actually gotten the opposite message. So not only did they miss out on opportunity or miss out on affirmation of up and coming burgeoning gifts, they actually, most times, the culture of women in churches over the last probably much longer, but in my experience, last 50 years or so, when you were sort of a loud voice or you had opinions about things, we often got quoted the verse, women should be quiet, right? You need to hold your tongue. I remember my mom saying, most people don't want to hear from a woman. Just keep your thoughts to yourself. Godly woman, knows her Bible, was a very strong leader. She herself felt the need to not give her opinion and helped me know that I shouldn't give my opinion, which is really not at all in the Bible.
Right.
And so those were cultural norms about women that were passed on from our mothers, passed on through women's ministry, passed on through just modeling. And so when I'm trying to find my leadership voice at, let's say I'm a 35-year-old woman who's sort of come up through that, I probably went to college, but I never really found my feet in ministry. And now God's moving in my heart. I have a couple kids. So I'm trying to think, where am I going to go with this? Do I want to write a book? Do I want to speak? Do I want to lead? I care about the church. I want to expand the kingdom. I'm like, I don't know what to do with that. So to you, it seems like no problem. Why don't you organize a team, or why don't you go to the senior pastor and say, I want to launch this ministry? That's totally natural for you because you have been asked to launch ministries your whole life. Yeah. For her, she's not even ever heard an announcement or an opportunity that says she could think of her own thing. So you know what most women are doing? They're starting their own nonprofits outside the church. It's not because they don't want to do it in the church. They don't think it's an option. Right. And so those are the kinds of things I'm trying to unravel for women that says, hey, maybe you should actually talk to your leaders. Maybe you should actually join arms with men and move forward. I can't find a calling to a gender in the Bible anywhere. I've looked multiple times. If anyone knows one, please show it to me. But I hear women all the time say that they're called only to women, only to women. And I'm like, that could be, or that could be what you've been taught. Is that women minister only to women. And there is a theological background for that. I do believe in women discipling women. Like, there's some framework for that, but almost no men who I see really doing big things in the kingdom say, I only talk to men. I only minister to men. I only want to raise money from men. They never say that. But women say that about their own calling all the time. And so I just want to kind of challenge the assumptions they're bringing into the conversation. And honestly, Matt, they're probably talking and using words that you use those same words, but they mean something totally different.
And it's been kind of funny over the past couple of years, especially. I've read a couple of books from female Christian leaders, and they write their books as if they're talking to other females, but I'm a male reading it. So they'll joke about, hey, girlfriend, I know, something about leggings or whatever. And I'm like, hey, I'm a guy reading your book too.
Right.
So yeah, I think
Well,
that is.
all I want to say is welcome to my world, because the number
Yep.
of sermons I've heard on fishing examples and working on
Yes.
my car and throwing my ball with my boy outside. You know how
Yes.
guys are. And I'm like, I actually
Yes.
don't, but feel free to use another male metaphor.
Well, and for the record, I don't fish or work in my car either. So-
Right.
Okay, so I'm sorry. I veered us into the male centric thing again. I'm sorry. I want to.
No, it's good. Well, I think it's an important part of the conversation when we're talking about leadership. It is one of the big parts of the issue, and we do need to kind of expand our understanding as all leaders, but especially when we're trying to lead people who are different than us, how to go about doing that and make sure our leadership has room for everybody.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, our time's going fast again. I want to end with us talking specifically to the women leading. Like you just mentioned, I don't want to rule out any women. So whether they're old or young, whatever the age they are, I want to talk to everybody. So let's start with, we'll get to the young leaders a little bit later. I feel like we've already talked about young women leaders a little bit. What about women who are middle life, older in life? What would you say to them just to help increase their own leadership or the baton passing for that age and stage of women listening? What kind of advice would you share with them?
Well, first, I should probably clarify. When I say young women leaders, I don't mean young in age. I mean young in leadership. And sometimes, so for those women who are in kind of 30s, 40s, 50s, or even beyond, I just want to encourage you, even if you feel like you're young in leadership, it doesn't mean you don't have leadership to share, right?
Yeah.
It's never more important than now for every person, every believer who has any inkling or even half a gift of leadership to step up and maximize it. We're all trying to steward our gifts for eternity. We want to step into the calling God has given us. And even if you haven't had the opportunity, or maybe you've missed some opportunities, it is never, ever, ever too late. Yeah. And please don't put pressure on yourself to be something that you haven't had the chance to grow into. I think sometimes women in their 40s and 50s particularly are like, man, I should be doing this, or I should be doing that. This is a lot of pastors' wives feel this challenge, right? They helped plant a church with their husband. They've not been actively, working on staff, but they've been a part of it and growing things and investing in people. And they go to lead and they come in at a job that's way above what they have personally led before. And it's overwhelming and scary. I'm just like, give yourself a break. If you've never led a small group, start by leading a small group. If you've never discipled one person, take one person and learn how to disciple them. Give yourself permission to grow into the things. You're not late. You're not behind. You haven't missed your opportunity. But if you overstretch, you're going to be taking on more pressure than God has called you to take on. Just ask him what door he wants to open and then walk through the door he opens and let go of everybody else's expectations, especially your own.
Yeah, I love that. And then thanks for clarifying that for the younger and older. I'm glad you clarified that. So maybe you probably already hit this a little bit, but any other final thoughts for younger leaders, both age or brand new in leadership? What else would you share with them other than go read your book? Of course, go read your book. What else?
Well, thanks. I will take that. I think young leaders, especially young in age, both men and women. So I'm thinking people under 40, particularly 20s, early 30s. You really are the generation that's going to lead the church differently. And this is not a theological conversation to me. I'm not trying to challenge anyone's theology. In fact, the research for my first book, we found that some of the cultures that were the most open to women leading at very high levels were very conservative complementarian churches who took seriously all of the yeses available to women. And so I just want to encourage you to expand your leadership now. You may need to not model yourself after every older leader you respect. You can take pieces of them, but as you grow in maturity, as you enter your late 20s, early 30s, all of us sort of hit this wall where we realize the people we've been modeling after, the gurus that we've gone to, you may not agree with every single thing they say. We're all a work in progress. I'm almost 50 years old. I'm like, I'm still learning humongous things that I hope no one is modeling after me. And so take the things that you love, take the things that resonate in your spirit, pray through everything you see. We don't actually follow people. We follow Christ. And so when you're young, you need a lot of examples. You're absorbing a lot of opportunities, a lot of ways of doing things, but you need to flip at some point and stop following humans and begin following the Bible and what God really says about things and the kind of leader he's really calling you to be. And when you do that, I'm confident your leadership will get expanded to include more people than you would have otherwise. So I just really encourage you. It is never too early to dive into God's word and see all of the people he used in leadership, all of the kinds of people he used, all of the giftedness that he has available to you in the kingdom, to surround yourself with diversity of all kinds, age, gender, race, and especially diversity of giftedness, so that you're leading a well-rounded, holistic team or ministry where everyone knows their gift can be welcome.
That's awesome, Kadi. I love it. So yeah, please, if you're listening, go check out Kadi's book, Find Your Leadership Voice in 90 Days. And real quick, I know you've also incorporated some like video training. I know that's kind of a new trend in book releasing. I really appreciate it. It's kind of nice to have some additional training. Do you want to give us a quick, what is that all about?
Sure. You can find it on my website, but I do have video curriculum that go with all of these. So Find Your Leadership Voice has an 8-week female leadership curriculum that goes with it. It's a great way. We call it a circle up group. I just really encourage women. Women leaders tend to be bad at networking with other female leaders. There's not enough of us, and we tend to be really busy. So it's hard to really invest in those peer relationships. So I would encourage you, circle up with at least 1 or 2 other people, but it could be as many as 10 or 20. Everybody gets the curriculum and then you come together and discuss it. It's my 8 best leadership lessons I use when I'm mentoring senior and executive pastors. So it's not female-based things. It's really they're really great 8 lessons about how to navigate organizational growth, how to deal with leadership hurt and disillusionment, how to steward your inner circle, how you find rest and manage your calendar. All of those sorts of things are kind of my best lessons on leadership, sort of packaged for women to kind of speed up the process of you being able to step into leadership. And then my other books, if you're a church leader who's wanting to maybe explore this area of female leadership, Developing Female Leaders is the book. It's got a lot of how-to practical guides, but I also have a masterclass that you can walk through with your team. I made it so that you could take about 15 or 20 minutes in a staff meeting once a week or once a month with your elders, your senior leadership team, even your whole staff, talk about one of the 8 best practices of the books, and then have some discussion about how you want to apply that principle in your church and help move the ball down the field on this topic.
Awesome. Kadi, I'm so glad we got connected. I feel like your voice is just so important in the church and in the culture at large. So thank you for the great work you're doing. Thank you for being generous with your time with us. It's great to chat with you again. And you're going to be speaking at the USMB convention coming up, right? So
Yep. Thanks,
awesome.
Matt. I really appreciate your time, and I appreciate you being a champion for leaders of all kinds and what you're doing here on the show and with your ministry.
I'm trying to be a good guy, so you can help me keep learning how to do that.
You got it.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Kadi. Grateful for your time.
The Christian Leader is the U.S. Mennonite Brethren magazine, published bi-monthly and mailed free of charge to anyone involved in a local USMB church. The September-October issue focuses on Article 16 of our USMB Confession of Faith, Work, Rest, and the Lord's Day. 3 articles published in the magazine focus on work and rest, while the online-only essays deal with our free time. Read the issue in print or online at christianleadermag.com.
Well, I always really enjoy talking to Kadi, so thank you again to Kadi for the great conversation today. And I do encourage you to check out both of Kadi's books, whether you are male or female. I think we can all learn a lot. So her new book, again, is called Find Your Leadership Voice in 90 Days. Or if you missed her first book called Developing Female Leaders, that's also a great read for all leaders in and outside the church. And again, wherever you land theologically, I think we would all agree that there is space for women to lead in church. Wherever you land on some of the bigger divisive issues, there definitely is space for women in our churches, and we need to take advantage of the great gifts that they offer. So really grateful that we're continuing to have this conversation, and I hope that we can all work together to make some progress in this area for the future and pass on those batons that Kadi was talking about. So even by listening today, I believe you're doing that. So thank you for your time today. We look forward to talking with you again next time. So have a great week, and we'll see you next time right here on the Lead Pods.
Thanks for listening to Lead Pods. Make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing to our show wherever you're listening today. Learn more by visiting usmb.org, and be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'll see you next time as we learn more practical tools to increase our impact together.